morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am so excited to bring Hanae Bezad as my next guest on the WanderWomen podcast. Hannah is this amazing, multi-talented and multi-skilled Wonder Woman, high-skilled immigrant woman that I had the pleasure to meet at a lovely festival last year. She's an impact entrepreneur. She is a board advisor. She's an investor. And for me, most relevantly, an author of an amazing book called As Being Other, which is a personal reflection on culture, on gender, and on identity. So Hannah has worked, in large consulting companies, in government, and international development institutions, and of course, running her own business. And she has a keen interest in the convergence of technology, sustainability, inclusion, entrepreneurship. So it's just a very, what is called as a multi-potentialite that I have the pleasure to bring to all of you today. A very good evening. Well, good morning to you, Hannah. How are you today?
Good morning, Shivangi. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm connecting from Vancouver. It's 8 a.m. over here. I am delighted to join you and to chat more about these topics.
Yes, thank you so much for your time today. Anna, tell me a little bit, and also for our listeners, what brought you to where you are today? Track for us a little bit about your life and your professional trajectory.
Mm-hmm. So I was born and raised in Morocco. I grew up in Rabat, traveling a lot to Europe then. As soon as I finished high school, I moved to Paris. Thanks to a scholarship from the French government, I was excited to dive into the academic field of Paris. So I did a number of dual degrees. The first one was designed by Bruno Latour, the late French philosopher. He put together a fantastic program to train youth that would be of service to climate action. And so I was really excited about that. It had math, physics, a number of important scientific inputs, and essentially a degree from Université Pierre-Marie Curie, but also the humanities side from Sciences Po. Mm-hmm. And from that place, I went to the US. I came back. I did another dual master's degree with HEC. I had dived into the world of business, and I was kind of excited about what business could do for good. Started my career in Paris as a digital strategy consultant, also with some involvement in this social entrepreneurship space, mostly through my board roles, and in particular with a nonprofit organization and the first incubator dedicated to women that had suffered violence. It was a topic close to my heart then. And with that experience, I decided to come back to Morocco. After I was trained with the dev skills. Essentially, I went through a boot camp and eventually brought it back home to Morocco, its first African location, but also throughout this period of time had kind of developed a vision for what became Duartech, a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing tech education to rural areas and focusing on women. And so that was back in 2017, really important to me to reconnect to my roots, but also to bring something substantial. And with that, I joined forces with other African diaspora and other young people that were eager to use the tech revolution for good. And so I partook in a number of Pan-African initiatives, namely Innovation for Policy, which became a foundation, but also AfriLabs, sharing a lot of knowledge and tools and experiences to, let's say, bring up the level of digital transformation and remove the barriers for entrepreneurs. And so when Morocco joined this Pan-African organization called Smart Africa as a member country, and it's a Pan-African organization that has now 35 member countries, I think at the time it was 30. So I was called to join the Secretariat as a policy advisor for startups and innovation ecosystems. So I moved to Kigali, and I was really excited about that because I had been twice, and for what Rwanda represents for the continent in terms of its vision for the use of innovation and technology. It's at the heart of Africa. And I joined then. It was a very special time. It was also the time of the pandemic. So essentially a few weeks after I moved in, borders were closed and it was a lockdown, and it was quite an intense experience in that sense. But we managed to do some good work and kind of lay the foundations for that vision. And after I contributed to this organization, I think for me it was important to solidify whatever I had built in Morocco and to make sure I could pass it on. And so I refocused on that, and then managed the transition out of Duartec, making sure that the team would continue, the board would continue, and they had sufficient funding for the next few years. And also, most importantly, started working on my book. And so with that, lots of travels, because it's very much in my DNA. I'm very much the explorer at heart. And it's also, it also came as places of inspiration. I was able to participate in creative retreats and such things that helped me kind of be with myself, integrate all of these very rich experiences, and work on being other, the beauty and power of being an outsider. And so I moved to Lisbon. That was 2022. Lisbon for me was a place of a sort of creative nest. I worked on my consultancy on the side, contributed to a number of organizations like Sovereign Nature Initiative and House of Beautiful Business. That's how we met. Eventually co-curated and co-hosted a festival and brought it to Tangier. And also worked on the book. And yes, and here I am now in Canada, starting a new chapter, which is not in the book. Perhaps it will be in its next edition.
You know, I mean, you have written a book called Being Other, so you probably have thought very deeply about, you know, what a sense of belonging means and what is home. You know, and having all of those, having lived on so many continents and so many countries and traveling so extensively, but also continuously redefining what it means to be, you know, to be you. What is your definition of home today? What does home mean to you today?
I'll start by saying that I think I've had thousands of definitions of being home and being at home. Home is the place where you find your people, or you develop a community, or you build projects, or you just have an innate sense of belonging. But for me, home is a delicious construct. Home is a return to self. Home is unlayering aspects of you that comes with understanding the pushes and the invitations and the shifts of being in otherness. When I moved to France, and for me, France was a country that kind of was mine as well. As much as I was not from a French family, I grew up with, you know, kids that were French Moroccans. I went to a French school. French was always part of my identity. My mom is a French literature professor. We have a 3-generation relationship to France, a legacy from colonialism. But so when I moved to Paris, and I kind of realized very few people actually had an understanding and awareness of the realities of North Africa or Africa at large, and they didn't feel close. And there was, well, plain racism or petty racism or microaggressions of such things. I think it was like an early disappointment that also pushed me to hone on the richness and the legacy of what I was carrying, which is this aspiration of making these identities speak together and speak respectfully to one another, and co-build something beautiful and unique and welcoming and warm and hospitable, and also mindful of its legacy, mindful of its history of hurts and wounds. And so it's that integration. And so, you know, as much as I had been told growing up that we were part of that, we were a potential bridge, it's something that I eventually materialized and made concrete throughout my journey as an adult and to this day. And so having decided, you know, having gained some agency living here and there, and, you know, having the right to be here and there, which means after 10 years, I I became a French citizen, and that meant a lot of work on emotional, psychological level of like what it means for me, what it means for my family, what it means for my ancestry and my lineage. Would my grandparents be like approve of that? Would my late father be happy with that? Such things. But it's also, well, now I have the freedom to not have to ask for a visa every time I have to go to this or that country. And I don't have to, justify so many things, but I know the experience of other people that do not have that. And I know that I can access spaces essentially that other people cannot access. And I know I can carry knowledge and understandings and visions, and I can convey that in a way that is conducive to creating an appetite for the other rather than fear and rejection.
Beautifully expressed, Hanae. Thank you for that. I'm wondering with this, evolving definition, and I love, coming back to yourself, and some people would say also coming back to your body, and not just your mind, which of course has the possibility to be everywhere and in so many places at the same time. But at least today we are only in one place with our bodies. I'm just wondering, is there a moment or is there a story where you felt, even though you were new, geographically new to a place, that you experienced something that made you feel as if you belonged, right? And I know that today it is not necessarily about geography. Some people feel as if they belong in online communities, right? So whatever that is for you, I'd love for you to share a story where you felt a strong sense of belonging, something that somebody else did, which maybe is, far beyond what we hear, right? Create DEI initiatives and have, unconscious bias training and, the corporate, list of things are, I think, quite well known to the community. But what are those little, small personal things that we experience? That's what I'm trying to collect from my guests.
So I have an experience from last night, actually. So I'm 3 months in Vancouver. And so in a way, I've successfully completed my first Canadian winter. That's my joke. And a lot of people are like, this is not Canada winter. That's the West Coast. But for me, it was real. I mean, it's an adjustment. There's a biology and a physiology to immigrating. And so it has a cost, it has wages. And so I had to fight against, it took me a lot more energy than a local to remain in balance and peace, and do my work and root myself and so on. But with that, I'm always curious about the creative scenes everywhere I go. I'm a creative at heart, and so I was happy to connect yesterday with a choir called YVR at the chorus studio. And I went to East Van and I joined as an observer. And eventually I was allowed to sing with everyone. It was a group of 60 people. And it was so smooth and easy to be there with everyone, happy to connect and happy to sing together. And I would say for someone who believes very much in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, for as much as the acronym and the terminology now irritates a lot of people, and some people want to throw it all together because it might have reached its limits, or maybe its expression has not necessarily reached its goals, its original goals. But it was and it is for me a realization that Canada has held and is still holding such conversations with a level of sincerity that I haven't seen in other places where I lived. And I think it has to do with enormous work that Indigenous peoples of this country have done. And so it's profoundly humbling, and it touched me because it speaks to me, it speaks to my what is at core for me, not just in terms of the identities that I carry as coming from Morocco, which has known many layers of colonialism, and which is a place where a lot of people are also kind of putting together beautifully identities and trying to harmonize them and make them pursue their dialogue for a beautiful coexistence and a meaningful and substantial coexistence, which is important in the world that we live in. But I think I found myself seen in such conversations in this new context here.
Wow, that is really a very powerful experience. And like you said, that whole idea, and of course, it's known that music really, removes barriers and brings people together, and the power of voice. That's so sensational. I mean, when you are sort of reinventing and rebecoming yourself, I'm wondering, have you discovered something surprising or unexpected about yourself when you make those moves, geographically, functionally, wherever? I think when we live in our home context, probably, we look at ourselves a bit differently as compared to when we are the other, like your book says, being the other. Is there something surprising or unexpected you discovered about yourself?
The last few months have made me realize that it's continuous work to not just define yourself in relation to the others, but also appreciate the boundaries that you have, and I think there's something that I've witnessed over years in the solitude, in the isolation that is felt in a lot in Western societies, particularly in within the youth, and this deep desire to reconnect and rebuild community, but from a place of pure sovereignty. And so all these thoughts came together as I found myself here, immigrating on my own, recreating a beautiful life on my terms, and adjusting to this environment, that what is given, what is offered in terms of opportunities for social connections or not, in comparison with other places where I lived, Morocco, Africa, Mediterranean culture, and so on. Hospitality is a big thing. And so, yeah, I found myself at times fragile, at times less confident than in roles and places where I had been shining. And so I had to rebuild that sense of confidence. And so it's a recomposition, and it's a recomposition with, like, I want to say a forward composition, because it's not just you take your puzzle and you put the pieces back together. You actually integrate current pieces and pieces from the future. And that's this beautiful alchemy that happens within you of rediscovering you and rediscovering your sense of otherness and your sense of humanity, and looking back and looking ahead and feeling and coming to a place of feeling at peace with all of the process.
There is a lot of, just your words and the way you express yourself, there seems to be a lot of like self-referencing that you do, and there is a lot of inner work that you have definitely done to be reaching where you have reached. But I wonder, have you had instances where somebody else, and I don't know who the somebody else could be, a mentor or a sponsor or a guide in whichever form, gave you advice that was particularly great or particularly bad? I think both of those are equally interesting, because I'm curious to know what that was and what did you learn, right? Either amazing or terrible.
The first conversation that comes to mind is with a colleague of mine back in Rwanda. She is from Ghana. She had been living in Rwanda maybe for 3 years before I joined. And it was 6 months in my time in Rwanda, and I started to, understand better, well, the context of the country, to put it simply. I mean, it's one thing to know the facts of the genocide and the post-genocide. It's another thing to actually experience it on a daily basis, what it means to live and work with people that have experienced the genocide within their families, whether having lost people or knowing being relatives of people that have committed crimes. And so it was, for me, a challenging time, because as much as I was appreciated for the value of my work and my effectiveness and my enthusiasm and all of those things that I usually bring in places where I do work, it was also all about the perceptions and how that would, the pace that I was setting for myself in the projects were affecting other people. And so we had a beautiful conversation with this colleague of mine. And she said a few things more on a personal level. She said, don't bring your past into your future. And it's this very simple line that stayed with me, but that gave me a lot to think about, because we usually do that. We want to bring, you know, especially as professionals, I value all the experiences that I've been involved with, a lot of fantastic, ambitious, creative projects, beautiful minds that I've had the honor to work with, and also some disappointments and such things. And it's the same on a personal level. And so that stayed with me. What does it mean to not bring your past into your future at that time and at this time for me? And I think it's an advice that stays with me. It means actually bringing it in a way that is aware, as in you bring your wisdom with you. You don't bring your baggage, you don't bring your wounds, because you do the work. Give your future the honor of being fully you.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, you know, some of the Zen Buddhism principles, right? Because that is what it ultimately boils down to, you know, how you can always have almost what they call as the beginner's mind. And I love what you said, that it doesn't mean that our prior experiences are not valuable, but only to the extent that we can learn and grow and not hold grudges and not have, like you called it, that unfinished business. Because I think consciously or subconsciously, and many times unconsciously, that might be impacting the way we sort of, you know, that impacts our future possibilities, the perspectives, the lens with which we look at the world, etc. So yeah, beautiful, you know, learnings with you there. The last thing I want to ask you, Hannah, is of course about your book, you know, Being Other, the tour you went on, and what have you learned that you would actually bring to WanderWomen around the world, right? So, as you know, there's probably a couple of million of high-skilled immigrant women. In my book, I talk about the unholy trinity, and thanks for, you know, being one of my interviews for my book. To be able to give real examples around the challenges of anti-immigration bias, gender, of course, you know, is something that is very present still, and we still see what is happening in so many places in the world, and ethnicity, right? And then once all of these things come together, add to that other biases of function, etc., it becomes like it's a melting pot, which comes by this beautiful word of intersectionality, right, of all of those challenges. So they don't remain individual challenges, they sort of compound each other. And I think that depending on the reality of the WanderWomen, which country they go to, what role, you know, what identity they bring from where they come, etc., there are so many challenges. And sometimes it is difficult to look at, especially, I think if you've done this a few times, maybe it's a little bit different. But if you're doing it for the first time and then you face rejection of all kinds and you start wondering, and your sense of confidence, you know, reduces. What would you say to somebody who's in the middle of that fire, more or less, right, of that journey of wondering if this was the right thing to do, you know, to leave the comfort of home, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start by saying that there's nothing wrong with asking yourself this question. And I think we can walk with doubt and still gain momentum and still be fully ourselves. We just need to be mindful of it not being stifling and keeping us stuck. So I think it's a matter of, again, harnessing the power of your creativity and your energy, and understanding that when you consciously channel it towards goals that are serving humanity and people and the planet, then it's probably aligned with a bigger scheme. And so essentially it's an invitation to trust, and it's an invitation to still move forward. Well, I learned so many things with my book, but mainly I learned that these spaces of dialogue, of healthy dialogue, vulnerable conversations, truthful conversations, and kind conversations were important, because it allows for people to come back to themselves and have these kinder conversations with themselves. And with that, come again to the world and be more humanly effective, I want to say. And re-instill a sense of humanity in being human, and being human together. And I realized it was absolutely necessary, needed. I also realized there's a lot of creative potential that at times is not channeled. And so a lot more people need an invitation and perhaps reminders that they're here to experience their own creativity, and the world wants to see them and wants to witness them. And so that keeps the energies flowing rather than stifled. And for me, like, coming back to the theme of DEIB, it's the whole point, you know. I think we don't need to get stuck in an acronym that is crystallizing so many tensions here and there, but it has the value of bringing and pushing a little bit more this idea of, hey, there's a lot more people that can contribute in a way that can, and we need to find the ways and the tools and the spaces to harmonize that. And it's a human right, and it's a ontological right. And so I find that if we are to change terminology, all the better. We just need to future-proof this work, because it is foundational to the future.
It really is. It really is. And I think in today's day and age, with what is happening also in our politics, it has become even more critical. Thank you so much, Anna, for your time and for sharing your wisdom and sharing your experience. Very, very generous of you. And I look forward to meeting you in whichever way. One of my plans is to run WanderWomen circles, I call them. So instead of doing book launch events, I think I am more, aligning towards, still have to plan all the details, what it will look like, but to really have the witnessing, the sharing, the witnessing that you so beautifully shared. Thank you so much for today, and I wish you a very nice day.